This man, like any other man, often seeks solace from the pressures of our culture and looks for a quiet moment away from the city. Today, he can find it here at the Harlan County Dam near Alma. This man is the United States Senator Carl T. Curtis from Nebraska, a man from Minden. These waters of the Republican River, now controlled and harnessed to serve the will of man, might very well cause him to reflect on how this river looked at another time when, in 1935, a flood laid waste many thousands of acres of farmland with a tragic loss of life of 113 persons. These scenes from original newsreels show some of the devastation of this terrible flood. A promise to Nebraska voters to try to seek legislation to help curb such devastation and loss of life was part of his campaign platform, which led to his election to Congress in 1939. I'm Bob Taylor. I was born and raised in Nebraska, have Nebraska interests, and still consider it my home. I'm very pleased to appear in this film documentary because, over the years, I've developed a keen respect for this statesman who, for a quarter century, has dedicated his energies to serving the people of Nebraska. Few persons in either party, anywhere in the country, have done more to prove their loyalty to the principles of good government than Carl Curtis. In this film documentary, you'll see some evidence of this and perhaps know him better as a man. When he went to Congress in 1939, he didn't forget his promise about flood control. Senator Carlson of Kansas was also in the House at that time.
Yes, I remember his first speech on the House floor was about his flood bill. He was a very determined man about it. In fact, he volunteered to serve on the Flood Control Committee. Then in 1943, the Missouri River flooded. It was very serious in South Dakota, Sioux City, Omaha, and in eastern Nebraska. In fact, all the way down to Kansas City. Curtis introduced a resolution seeking a comprehensive basin study, and it passed. As the Flood Control Act of 1944, it passed the House and the Senate. Curtis was named a conferee. In fact, he was the only member from the Missouri Basin states. Finally, the president signed the bill.
The Flood Control Act of 1944 became the base for the entire Pick-Sloan project. You would say, and quite correctly, that Carl Curtis was the father of the Pick-Sloan plan. It was his introduction of the resolution that has led to the wonderful work which has been accomplished to control floods, reclaim farmland, and develop irrigation for a 10-state area, an area 1/6 of the United States. All of the Nebraska irrigation districts developed since then were a part of this Pick-Sloan plan. Quite an accomplishment, wouldn't you say, for a country lawyer from Minden? How does a country lawyer become a United States Senator? The story of Carl Curtis began on a spring morning on a farm a few miles from Minden. This, as it looks today, is the country school Carl attended as a boy. Harold Lundeen, now in the seed business in Minden, remembers.
Carl and I were in school at the same time. He was in the Boy Scouts. which is one of the ways he learned about honor as a code of conduct. Then we both got into 4-H club work. Carl's project was a victory garden. It was a good one, and it got him a certificate of merit. Now, not only that, but he earned almost $100 selling his garden produce from house to house. Ben Bracken was superintendent of schools.
I first knew Carl as a sophomore, and I could see traits of character in Carl then that have made him big in political life. He has never gone for the big deficit spending ideas or bureaucratic control or interference in the affairs of states and the people. Maybe it is because he came from good Swedish stock. His grandfather was a pioneer blacksmith at Sacramento, Nebraska. His father, Frank Curtis, farmed 160 acres. He was a member of the county board, and his name is on the cornerstone of the county courthouse. Carl was the youngest of 8 children. He took seriously the commandment, honor thy father and thy mother. But a tragedy of illness was to befall the family while he was at Nebraska Wesleyan University at Lincoln.
I'm Carl's sister Verna, and this is our sister Florence. Our mother became paralyzed. Her entire right side was affected, and then she fell and broke her paralyzed hip. Of course, Carl's college plans were interrupted. Paul Warp, who now runs the Warp Publishing Company in Minden, knows about that.
Carl was my 6th grade teacher, and in the summer he ran the American Legion swimming pool. At night he studied law, by himself, the hard way, out of books. In January of 1930, he took the bar examination, writing 65 pages in longhand, and he passed it.
So Carl bought a few law books and borrowed some and started to practice law. That fall, they were going to elect county officers. So Carl ran for county attorney and was elected.
Here in the First Presbyterian Church in Minden on June 6, 1931, Carl and Lois Wiley Atwater were married. It's been a wonderful marriage, and Carl is always quick to credit his wife for a large share of his success. The first Curtis campaign for Congress was in 1938. He didn't have much support in the primary, but he worked hard and he won. His career in Congress was launched when he was sworn in by Speaker William Bankhead.
Carl has an outstanding record in conservation. Not only the Great Pick Sloan Plan, but he was co-author of the Small Watershed Act with its many Nebraska projects such as Salt Creek and Brownell. And he has fought effectively to increase agricultural income. Carl and I have been in the House and in the Senate together and as a team. Nebraska is best served in this way, and the nation is best served in this way. We should all like to see it continue.
I'm Walter Moat from Plainview, Nebraska. I've known Senator Curtis most of my life. Philosophically, he is pretty much the same man he was when he first came to Congress. Responsible, infallibly honest, and very tight when it comes to spending the people's money. He says you can't squander your way to prosperity. Physically, he is 30 pounds lighter and as tough as nails. I've traveled with him, and often when I'm worn out, the senator is still going. He has a very efficient staff. He says it is the cream of the crop. A new Nebraska senator could spend half his term or more trying to establish a staff half as good.
We receive more than 100,000 pieces of mail in a year. Some of these letters contain some very personal problems for the people who wrote them, and often some difficult problems for the senator in helping solve them. But he succeeds where others fail.
I'm Dennis Sherman, and this is my wife, Ruth. In 1962, we sold our furnishings and raised all the money we could, closed our home in Lincoln, Nebraska, and moved to Korea to work in a Korean orphanage.
We were there for a year and a half until our money ran out. Now we are back in the States, and if it is God's will and we can save enough money, we'll go back to Korea again. Meantime, we adopted 3 Korean children, who with our other 2 children gives us a family of 5. This is Chun Sim Kim, whose American name is Jeanette. Out in the backyard is Jana, our first adopted child, and our little boy who we named Curtis, in honor of Senator Curtis. None of these orphan children would have had a home with us if the senator hadn't helped us by introducing the legislation necessary to bring them into this country.
Senator Curtis is a generous and understanding man, and it gives you faith in your senator to know that he looks upon Nebraskans as individuals with individual problems.
We think these children need the love of a family and the security of a home, and they appreciate it.
대단히 고맙습니다.
대단히 고맙습니다. Thank you. Come here.
In Korean, this means, thank you, Senator Curtis. Thank you.
I'm Helen Russell of Lincoln. It wasn't very long ago that we almost lost the Lincoln Veterans Hospital. It was scheduled to be closed, and I just don't know what some of the veterans and their families would have done. It was Senator Curtis who helped save the hospital for us, I know, because I've been a volunteer worker here for 20 years. Matter of fact, Senator Curtis has done a lot for veterans, but I expect most of it you have never heard about.
I'm Donna Noli of Omaha, and this is my husband, Leo. He is a victim of Berger's disease that started while he was in the Army. It is a horrible affliction, and Leo has had both legs amputated, as well as fingers on both hands. Of course, he wears artificial limbs much of the time. We were having trouble convincing the authorities that the disease was associated with his years in the service when he was in the jungles of India and Burma.
We were frantic with worry and medical expense. I had been unable to work for a long time. I had big debts, and they were going to foreclose on my home because I couldn't make the payments.
I sent all the facts about the case to Senator Curtis. He finally located Leo's former commanding officer, and affidavits were obtained. But even then we weren't accepted as a valid claim. Then the senator secured an independent medical opinion, and finally the claim was ruled okay. Honestly, I don't know what we would have done without Senator Curtis's help.
Fine. Okay. Yes, Lois. I'll expect to be home about, 7 o'clock. Okay, Mother. Through the years, the frosting on the cake for me has been my wife, Lois. I want you to know Mrs. Curtis, my best friend, my wisest counselor, and my steadfast helpmate. And this is my granddaughter, Denise. Sufficient reason for me to always keep up the fight for an even better United States. This is Denise's mother, our daughter, Clara May Hopkins. And Denise's daddy, our son-in-law, James Hopkins. This is our son, Carl Curtis, Jr., a Lieutenant J.G. in the United States Navy, currently assigned to the USS Elocoman. Everyone calls him Tom. And this is his wife, Judy. You should know my administrative assistant. Will you ask Miss Rook to come in, please? Miss Doris Rook has been on my staff since 1945. She plays an essential role in the administration of my official duties.
Good morning, Senator.
What is on our schedule first this morning?
The 4-H Club boys and girls who are attending the 4-H conference in Washington are here.
Good. Send them in, please.
Will you come in, please? Senator, this is Sandra Shalupski, and this is Nancy Sofel. This is Lyle Joyce, and this is Gary White.
How do you do?
It's good to have you here, all of you. I'm always pleased to have visits from 4-H Club members. I was in 4-H Club myself when it first began. What can I do for you while you're here in Washington?
Well, it's not 4-H, but I'm writing a school paper on the sciences. Aren't you a member of the committees for atomic energy and aeronautics and space?
Yes, both. The Joint Committee on Atomic Energy deals primarily with peacetime uses of atomic energy, but the peacetime use has a military use and vice versa. In January, I attended a ceremony at Groton, Connecticut. Among those who attended was Vice Admiral H.G. Rickover, the distinguished white-haired Navy man familiarly known as the father of the nuclear submarine. The event took place at the Electric Boat Division of General Dynamics, and the occasion was the laying of the keel of the USS Norwal, an attack-type submarine.
We are honored today by the presence of a United States Senator and member of the Atomic Energy Committee, the Honorable Carl T. Curtis.
There were many Navy officers and their families, as well as workers of the submarine base. Concerning the space program, as a member of the Aeronautic and Space Sciences Committee, I was at Cape Kennedy at the time of the Saturn Apollo launching. I saw construction at Complex 39 where the moon launch will take place. Also, I saw the huge mobile servicing structure, as well as the mobile launchers which support the space vehicle. In the world's largest building, the Vehicle Assembly Building, I viewed one of the Saturn units for the moon program and discussed this with Colonel Clark, assistant to the director of the NASA Space Center at Cape Kennedy. Also, I discussed the project with Dr. Kurt Debus, director of the Space Center, and with Dr. Werner von Braun, who is in charge of developing NASA's launch vehicles. And I visited with Dr. Robert Gilruth, director of the Manned Space Center at Houston. At Mission Control, I had a demonstration of a spacecraft trainer by astronauts McDivitt and White. In fact, with astronaut White as a pilot, I flew a simulated flight in space. But neither White nor I did the spacewalk that White had done before during the GT-4 flight that you all remember. Of course, the highlight of this tour of inspection was the launching of the Saturn Apollo 201. This was an exciting experience when you realize that never before had we launched a vehicle with a total thrust of more than 1.5 million pounds.
Take that, William.
Count.
10, 9, 8.
Ignition. Wonderful flow. Main stage. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
What are some of your other interests?
Senator, what is the most difficult problem for our country?
Well, our most difficult problem is conflict. I've served in the Congress during World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. It's always sad. In wartime, we must give our absolute, total, and complete support to the men who are fighting so that they can win. And we must serve their families and their loved ones at home. My only son wears our nation's uniform, and my hopes and prayers for a durable peace are like those of all other parents. It seems as though the world is filled with conflict. Wherever conflict exists, I regret it.
Senator Curtis has had to deal with some real conflict on the home front. I'm Burkett Van Kirk. As legal counsel for the Senate Rules Committee, I assisted Senator Curtis in the Billy Saul Estes inquiry, the TFX scandal, and others. It was a thankless job for the senator, and I doubt if the public really appreciates the wonderful work he did. One of his most frustrating and difficult assignments was the Bobby Baker investigation. I remember one day when Bennett Williams, Baker's lawyer, was stalling and trying to add to the confusion and trying to keep his client from testifying.
If Mr. Baker is to be made to sit here, sir, and to invoke his constitutional rights before this committee, when the committee has been advised that he will invoke his constitutional rights, I feel that he should not be held up to public obloquy on the television cameras, and I ask, sir, at this time, that the television cameras be excluded from this hearing room, because the sole purpose of this hearing, in the light of the stipulation that we are making, cannot be a legislative purpose, because we've advised you, sir, that we will answer no questions.
He's not asking that. No, he's not asking that. Yeah. Furthermore, I don't think that we should let the record stand that this is being held solely for the purpose of a television show. I think you'll say, Tom, if you want to be very emphatic.
Well, if it be unwarranted, Mr. Chairman, then we can prove it's not warranted by turning out the lights. It's a quick way to prove that my statement is unwarranted. Let's turn out the lights.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Curtis.
I would suggest that Mr. Williams withdraw his statement to the effect that the sole purpose of these hearings is for the television show, or that he be expelled from the room, or that he stand charges of contempt. Please don't do that. This is serious business. The Senate directed this committee to conduct this hearing. We didn't ask for it. Mr. Williams is entirely out of line. He has no authority to make such a statement. We do not have to tolerate it. And speaking for myself only, we will not. This committee did not ask for this task, but it's here.
Carl Curtis is a hard-working public servant, dedicated to honesty and integrity in government and to the service of the people of his state and his country. His work in exposing the questionable dealings of Bobby Baker and Jimmy Hoffa will go down into history as one of the greatest contributions of this Congress.
Service, responsibility, and integrity, these are the hallmarks of Senator Carl Curtis. We are very proud that he is an alumnus of Nebraska Wesleyan University, and he has made a considerable contribution to Nebraska education by serving as one of our trustees.
Over the years, Carl Curtis has rendered effective service, not only to Lincoln's educational institutions, but to our factories, our packing plant, and to all our businesses which provide employment for our people.
Here's a man that everybody likes, right, Senator Morton?
I'll say he's the man that everybody likes. I sit next to Carl Curtis on the Finance Committee of the Senate. He obviously knows as much about tax law as any man in Congress, and certainly knows more about Social Security laws than anybody in Congress.
Let's face it, there are 68 Democrats and 32 Republicans in the United States Senate. That's an imbalance. Under our balanced system of government, we need Carl Curtis in the United States Senate. I think Democrats and Republicans alike will agree that this is not a matter of partisanship when it comes to balance, because they're Americans first and they're party members second.
Being a South Dakotan, I have more than a little knowledge of the Curtis work which he did to bring about the flood control legislation that started the entire Missouri River Basin project. resulting in dams like this one at Garrison, the Oahe Dam, the Big Bend Dam, the Fort Randall Dam, and Gavin's Point. And of course, there is the important Harlan County Dam, the Red Willow Project, and the Enders Dam. But of course, this means more than flood control. It means irrigation, better farm practices, and more security for farmers. And it means stabilization of the river channel to open navigation from Sioux City to St. Louis. The recreation value alone has been a more specific contribution to tourism than any other thing in the history of the Midwest. And the value to the conservation of wildlife is inestimable. Ducks, geese, deer now flourish where they were formerly unable to survive. Hydroelectric power has revolutionized life on the farm and made cheaper electricity available to the cities.
Omaha industry and employment both depend upon a healthy economy. Senator Curtis, because of his work to improve Missouri Basin conditions, has done much to help Nebraska business. This has also been especially helpful to agriculture. Furthermore, the senator has played a vital role in the beef import issue, which has contributed to our being one of the most prosperous livestock centers. And concerning the boxcar shortage, agriculture, industry, and the railroads are all appreciative for his legislation in this regard. But the most important asset of our state, or America, is its youth. I know that Senator Curtis appears regularly before youth groups throughout the state to help them better understand the significance of the American heritage, to bring them encouragement. Because of this, Nebraska boys and girls know Senator Curtis exemplifies integrity in government in its finest sense. He faces issues squarely, takes his stand, and you always know where he stands. I'm a Harry Bird Democrat, but I always vote for the man who is best qualified for the job. And Carl Curtis is certainly good for the future of Nebraska.
Last year, Nebraska almost lost its fine senator. On November the 14th, Carl Curtis was taking off in a light plane from Mullen, Nebraska, and the plane unfortunately crashed. In the crash, he injured his shoulder to such an extent that he couldn't get his seatbelt undone. And there he was trapped in there, and the flames, of course, were beginning to consume the front end of the plane, were almost to the cockpit. Finally, they fortunately got him out just in time, and the rest of the plane was completely destroyed. I'm Senator George Murphy from California, and I want to tell you people how thankful I am that your good senator was spared to us. And I know that my colleagues in the Senate join me in saying that we'd have had an awful bad time getting along without the services of your fine Senator Curtis.
Senator Curtis keeps in touch with folks at home. He talks to Nebraskans over radio, discussing and reporting on current legislation. He makes bi-weekly TV film programs which are sent to Nebraska TV stations. Conducts press conferences for improved communication with constituents. When he is home, he speaks at luncheons and dinner gatherings. Attends coffees with men and women who want to be more knowledgeable about what is going on in Washington. He has given inspirational, nonpartisan talks to students in almost every high school in the state. Listen in and judge the man for yourself in this portion of a speech in January in Lincoln.
Our freedom is most precious. It takes brave people to die for their country, and many of our heroes have laid down their lives for America. We should honor them always, and we should honor the men who are now fighting for us. I would remind you, though, that it takes bravery to live for your country. In our national anthem, we sing about the land of the free and the home of the brave. May those words ever describe our beloved republic. Think of it. The land of the free and the home of the brave. My closing thought is this. When we are no longer the home of the brave, we'll not be the land of the free. I thank you.
I have known my good friend, Senator Carl Curtis, for a long time. He is an energetic Republican statesman and a respected leader. During my White House years, I've found that he was one of those dependable persons who talked straight and talked common sense. In every walk of life, there are those who stand on and are guided by principle. On Capitol Hill during my presidency, and still today, one who does so is Carl Curtis. I hope he stays in the Senate for a long time.
Well, this is our story. The story of United States Senator Carl T. Curtis, a statesman who stands on and is guided by principle. A man from Minden.